You've probably heard it said that people like to do business with those they know, like, and trust. I like to think of it as a ladder, and the first rung on the ladder is attention, getting on people's radar. Because for you to get people to like you, first they have to know you. For you to get people to trust you, first they have to know you and like you. Now, I say all of that to say this. If you're trying to grow your business, one of the biggest drivers of growth is attention, because without it, even the best products or services won't move. Now, the biggest driver of attention is and always has been media. But media keeps evolving with technology. But also with the evolution of technology comes a change in the way we consume information, a change in the way we connect with each other, and a change in the things we pay our attention to. Now, having said all of that, it seems to me from my observation and from conversations I've had here and there that the way most businesses, especially in the B2b space, show up to attract attention and essentially build presence hasn't caught up to the current wave of media. I say this because I've had several conversations with business leaders trying to figure out how to build an online presence, and they're typically stuck on the how and the why. So I felt it was a good idea to address that in this video. We'll take a look at the shift that's been happening in media. We'll look at the right way to build presence, and I'll share a simple framework to get the best out of media for your business. But first, let's talk about the real reason why your content may not be getting any engagement online and what you might be getting wrong about content creation. In 2025, most people in business understand that content matters. We know that we should be publishing something out there consistently for us to stand any chance of being relevant. But I find that most of us don't understand why. Even I have only recently come to understand that while content has a role to play in growing your business, content actually doesn't grow your business. And without this clarity, two things often happen. When you're publishing content for your business, you're publishing just to tick a box on your to-do list, but you're not very clear on the actual objective content creation is supposed to achieve in helping you achieve your overall goal or execute on your overall strategy. So you end up posting content just to stay visible, just to say that you posted content, and you often find that this kind of content is vague and it doesn't do much for anybody. The other thing that happens is that when you publish, you're publishing essentially ads, glorified ads in the name of content. So if everything you post is about your product or service and all you have to tell people is come and buy my stuff or look at this new thing we created, and there is a place for that. There's a place for ads, there's a place for sharing updates and stuff like that. But if all you have to tell people is me, people will tune out before long. And these days is easy to tune out. It's literally a swipe away or a tap on a screen to skip an ad. And because we're not clear on the role content plays, we find ourselves as businesses in a situation where we're chasing visibility as the main goal. Now, visibility is fine as a metric, but it shouldn't be the main goal. Imagine trying to justify to a business leader that all you have to show for the resources spent on content creation is the amount of likes they got or the amount of comments they got. And I think it's no wonder that a lot of decision makers don't really give content the light of day, or they don't take it seriously enough, because it's hard for them to equate the likes to the bottom line. Likes don't make money, essentially, right? So the reason why I say that visibility should not be your goal is because it's just the entry point. Visibility is the lowest form of presence. You can be visible and still be relevant. So back to the main question, what role should content play in your business? The short answer is that it should connect you to an audience. But to make it make sense, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at the shift that's happened in media and what that means for businesses. Okay, so we've come from an era where mass media was the only form of media. But currently, we're in the social media era. And by social media, I don't just mean the platforms like Instagram and Pinterest and the rest of it. I mean, the nature of media has made the world a lot more social. Remember earlier on, I said that as technology evolves, so does media. And as technology evolves, so does human behavior. It changes the way we connect, the way we consume information, and where we focus our attention. That's what I mean by that. Currently, you can say that mass media is still here, but I think we can all agree that everybody's attention is online. At least most attention is online, right? Now, when I say the world is a lot more social, to make it make sense, somebody in Russia can post a video on Instagram today and I can have a banter with somebody in China about that video. That's how connected we are today, right? Now, because we just made the shift from the mass media era to the social media era, a lot of our communication instincts as businesses are still heavily influenced by the mass media era. Naturally, some things translate quite seamlessly too. But I want to highlight some key differences between both eras because I feel like we might get some pointers to guide us in how to approach our communications going forward in a way that helps us to get the best out of the social media era for our businesses. In the era of mass media, the way brand communications worked was you had one key message, you pushed it out to the public repeatedly until the message stuck. TV, radio, billboard, print ads. You pushed it out, people consumed it, and that's the way it worked. Now, the reason this worked back then is that we weren't spoiled for choice back then, and we didn't have a lot of control over what was visible to us. So let me make it make sense with an example. Let's say I'm on my way to work and I want to listen to the radio. I had only a handful of radio stations that I found interesting anyway, and I'm sure most people were like me. But let's even say in the weird instance that I like all radio stations, AM and FM. There's still very few compared to what is available to us today. Put a pin on that. Now, let's say I tune into Cool FM, for example, to listen to music. Yes, they gave me good music, but along with the music came ads, and I could skip to another station, but it's going to be the same thing. But these people are giving me the good music, so I'm just going to sit here through the ads and all of that. So the radio station had my attention, right? Now, if you contrast that to the current date, content is essentially infinite, quote unquote, because most people with a phone can publish, and they do. But along with that infinite amount of content is a lot more control over what's available to me. On the one hand, I can swipe away from content I don't like. I can mute entire accounts. I can mute entire categories of content. Whether the algorithm gets it right or not, that's a different question. But I can mute entire categories of content. There are several platforms. There are millions and millions of people on those platforms, and everybody's talking. Now, the second key difference I want to highlight is that in the mass media era, when you as a business put out a message through a billboard ad, a print ad, whatever it is, we couldn't respond as the audience. And even if there was any public discourse based on what you as a business did or said, it happened offline. It happened between friends in the house. It happened in the office between colleagues. And before the rumblings, if any, got back to the brand, it took a while for that to build up, and for it to get loud enough for the brand to hear it. Compared to today, as soon as you put out whatever you put out on whatever platform, people can respond directly to that in a matter of seconds. And if whatever you said resonated positively or negatively, it took minutes for it to become a widespread public discourse. And sometimes, especially in the negative aspects, the public discourse can spread faster than the message you actually put out as a business. And so because businesses back then didn't expect the public to respond, the focus was on controlling the message. So they focused on precision and repetition and consistency rather than participation. And so back then, things like slogan mattered a little bit more because those were little bite sizes of information that could easily stick in our minds. So if you made the slogan catchy and interesting and backed with a little bit of repetition, constantly showing it to people, it will stick in people's minds. So the shift from mass media to social media is quite significant because social media offers a new architecture for communication. We've gone from a one-to-many broadcast system to a many-to-many conversational system. What that means is that anyone with a phone can publish and everyone can respond. And those conversations are happening in real time, in public, at scale. And that right there is what has shifted the role of brand communication from message delivery to relationship building. That's what the conversational nature of social media has enabled. And that brings us to the heart of the problem of businesses trying to build an online presence. Relationships. In the mass media era, the target of the broadcasts were potential customers and customers. But in the current era of media is a little bit more complex than that because for one, you find that the most influential people online, the influencers, typically don't have a product they're selling, or at least they didn't become influential because of the products they were selling. Influencers are only influential because of the relationships they've been able to build with an audience. And they build the relationship with the audience by contributing to ongoing conversations within communities online. So influencers are typically content creators, and they create content for the sole purpose of connecting with an audience. It's only when they've established a connection with an audience and built a relationship over time do they now leverage those relationships for opportunities. And those opportunities come in the form of brand deals, and in some cases the influencers sell their products too. This is the shift that businesses need to make when approaching media. So your customer and your audience should be treated differently, even if we're referring to the same set of people. What I mean by that is, by nature of the definition of those words, your customer is your customer because you sell to them. That's a transactional relationship, and it's different from a relationship with an audience. A relationship with an audience is a bit more akin to what I explained earlier about the way influencers build an audience. It's about being a part of a community. It's about contributing to a conversation. It's about starting a conversation and building a relationship. That's the difference between the two of them. Customer is a bit more short term, and maybe they can be return customers, so maybe long term in that sense. But a relationship with an audience is far from transactional and is a bit more longer term, if that makes sense. And so in order to be able to build a relationship with an audience, businesses need to develop what I call their social face. And I'm going to talk about that in the next section. So at this point, we've established that the role of content is to build relationships with audiences online. And the shift from broadcasting to relating is the key to getting the best out of this current media era. From many conversations I've had and just my general observation, and some of you would have heard this statement, there seems to be a belief that our attention spans has reduced as a people generally. But my opinion is that couldn't be more wrong. Because in one weekend, there are people who will sit down and binge watch a whole season of a series they love. That's many, many hours, right, of content that they just binge watched in, a very short amount of time. So I don't think it's a question of shortened attention spans. I think if what you have to present to people is resonant enough, if it connects well enough, if it's something they vibe with, I think they'll sit down and they'll sit with you for as long as needed. So if you have a 1 hour long content and people are not really watching it past 2 minutes, then it's not that their attention spans are shorter. It's that your content after 2 minutes got a little bit boring and you lost them along the way, right? And this is the dilemma of the content creator. It's something that content creators are always fighting to work on. On YouTube, one of the key metrics you have to look at to improve your content over time is to watch the audience retention graph, which is a graph that shows how much of the audience you're able to keep at each point of the video as the video goes. And typically the way it goes is most of the audience are at the beginning, and then after a few seconds it drops. So those are things that we have to watch as content creators if you want to get better. But I digress. So the question to be answered is, how do we create content that matters to people? And if I'm going to be honest, there is no one straight answer. It requires a little bit of research to understand the people you want to target, understand the communities they're a part of, and understand what matters to them. Because when you're armed with that information, it's now easy to contribute to the conversation, like I said before. So you might still be scratching your head at this point, thinking, okay, yes, I've said that you use content to connect with an audience and build a relationship that way and build trust and all of that. But how does that translate to the bottom line? It's back to the influencer analogy again. Influencers make content not to sell anything, but to connect with an audience. It takes a while for them to build a relationship with that audience and grow that audience to a decent sized amount of people, right? Or we can simply put it as, it takes a while for them to become an honorary member of a community. When they become influential in that community, now they have a lot of people's attention. That attention is the assets they now have and can now leverage for money. Same thing in business. When you have the attention of a group of people, when you have the attention of your community, where you become an honorary member of a community, now you have an asset you can leverage to grow your business. You have the attention of people you can leverage. It used to be that when you put out a message, you can directly measure, okay, 10 million people saw this, business grew by X% by the end of the year, but it's not quite linear anymore. Now is you put out a message, you put out another message, you put out another message, you build an audience. Now you have an audience that you can leverage their attention for things, create events that you can sell at. You can even tell them about products or services that you have in the works or you want to promote and things like that. But you understand the community, you understand the culture in the community, you understand the language. So you know how to put it to them in a way that will drive sales, in a way that they will be interested in it, if that makes sense. So the asset isn't the content. The asset is the relationship you build. When you build that relationship, you now have an asset you can leverage to make money, if that makes sense, right? So again, for businesses to get the best out of this current era of media, they need to develop their social side, because that's the side that goes to relate with communities, become members of a community, and hopefully with time become honorary members of that community, become influential in those communities to the point where you know you have their attention because they trust you enough with the kind of relationship you've built with them, if that makes sense. So what does it take to build a relationship with an audience? If we look at it from a human point of view, let's say I want to build a relationship with someone, platonic or even romantic. I know who they are. They've given some signal that attracted me to them, right? Now, I know the kind of relationship I want to build with them as well. I know if it's platonic, I know if it's business, I know if it's romantic and all of that. And then it's now up to me to send the kind of signals to them to let them know that I'm trying to build this kind of relationship with them. Now, sometimes these signals happen subconsciously, but sometimes they happen strategically, especially in the case of romantic. It's usually a bit more strategic in the way you reach out to the person. But I know who they are. I know the kind of relationship I want to build with them. Thirdly, I now need to figure out how I'm going to show up consistently to build that relationship with them. Consistent texting, reaching out to them to check on them and their family and things of that nature. And so if you have some clarity on an answer to those three questions, you put yourself in a good stead to build a relationship with an audience. So if we swap that human relationship to a business to an audience, is you know who you're trying to reach out to and to reach out to developers. Okay, you know the kind of communities they're a part of. You understand the cultures of those communities. Those communities usually have their own language and inside jokes. It takes a little while to learn those things, but you need to put in the hard yards to learn those things. And like I said, there is no one size fits all. So you have to do some research to understand those communities. Now, secondly, you already know the kind of, or at least you should be clear on the kind of relationship you want to build with them. We're going to go a little bit into how you can define the kind of relationship you want to build with them, but you should have some clarity on the kind of relationship you want to build with them. And then thirdly, you need to figure out how you're going to show up in a way that you build that relationship with them over a period of time. So you need to be clear on the kind of experiences you're going to give them, the kind of points of view you're going to contribute to the ongoing conversations, like I've said, and things of that nature. So if you're clear on the answer to these three questions, you put yourself in a good position to build a relationship with those audiences. Also, those three questions form the three parts of the framework I'm going to share in this video. Part one is to define your audience. Part two is to define the relationship you want to build with them. And part three is to design the way you're going to show up to build the relationships with them. Okay, let's go into each one of them. So part one, understanding your audience. I think I've already said before that you need to do some research into this. It requires a little bit of patience, doing some research, understanding communities and things like that. But in defining your audience, you need to go beyond surface level stuff. And often people want to default to their audience being their customer. Again, like I said, even if your customer are the people you want to be talking to on a regular basis, you need to think of them as more than your customer. You need to go beyond thinking about why they will buy from you to thinking about why would they want to build a relationship with you, right? You need to go into their interest, because sometimes the correct answer is not to create content about what you're a professional at, or create content like what I'm doing now. I'm a branding person. I'm creating content about branding and content creation. Sometimes that's not the correct answer, because if we take a look at Procter & Gamble, this is an example. I'm sure this is not the last time I will use, but Procter & Gamble in the 1930s wanted to sell soap, and their decision was to create drama series that we called soap operas, right? So soap and drama, they're not related. They could have started creating shows about soap or something like that, which is what a lot of people default to. So for them to arrive at doing soap operas for the audience, that means they understood their audience beyond people who buy soap or homemakers who use soap when cleaning the house. They knew that they were women. They knew that these women likely would like dramas or entertainment and things like that. And so the soap opera was born. Same thing in your scenario. You need to think beyond the people who buy from us or why they buy from us. You need to look at their interests, their actual interests, and then appeal to those interests, if that makes sense. Now, the second part of the framework is to define the kind of relationship you want to build. Again, here, a good rule of thumb is to be as descriptive as possible. Don't just stop at mentor. Don't just stop at thought leader. What does that mean? I'm going to deliver content that teaches people XYZ so that they can get XYZ transformation. It's better than just thought leader or content creator or whatever it is. So one thing that I think can serve as a guide or a foundation to build the definition of your relationship on are the 12 Jungian archetypes. Now, while these archetypes define human characteristics, those characteristics go a long way to defining the way those kind of people show up in relationships, if that makes sense. So really quickly, in order to keep this video from being unnecessarily long, I felt it was a good idea not to go through each one of these archetypes in this video. But what I did was compile a list of them and then show how they show up in relationships. And what I mean by that is, you see here, I talk about the core motivation, the primary offer, the tone, then the way they leave the audience feeling, and the way the content is postured, and then the emotional promise each one of them have. So each one of these kind of points to the way each one of these archetypes show up in relationships. Again, the idea here is to make these archetypes a foundation for you to build on. And then the other thing I want to say about the archetypes is, typically no one is just a single one. You're usually dominant in one, but you're typically a combination of others. So don't just look at it from the point of view of who am I exactly here. Just look at the characteristics of each one and see which one resonates with you. And then the blend of each one of them should be the foundation on which you develop the or rather you describe the relationship you're trying to build with the audience, if that makes sense. This list is available for download via the link in the description. Don't worry, you don't need to drop your email or anything. It's a completely no strings attached download. Just click the link in the description and the download should happen automatically. I hope you find it valuable. Yeah, let's keep going. And then the third part of the framework is to design how you're actually going to show up. Now, a lot of people default to, we're going to create content. That's how we're going to show up online. But content is so vague. I usually prefer, when I'm doing these kind of strategy sessions, to use the word experiences, because content is a vague word. Okay, for example, I'm creating content right now. I'm talking about branding and teaching you how to build brand through content, right? But this morning, I was listening to my pastor on Instagram Live pray for us. That's also content. Mr. Beast does essentially game shows on YouTube. That's content. So what does content really mean? Again, we need to be descriptive about the way we're going to show up. And one thing that will help with the description here is to understand the communities. So let's say, for example, I want to appeal to football fans online. The football fan community is an interesting one because at a top level, there are fan channels and rival clubs fans usually go against each other naturally, right? But you also have a situation where within fan bases, so Arsenal fans, there are Arsenal fans that go against other Arsenal fans for several reasons. And if you want to reach out to that community, those are nuances that if you understand, you can use to your advantage to really connect with the community, to really put your point of view forward, to really get people to listen to you and things like that. So research is key. It's important to understand the communities, the culture within those communities, the languages they use, the inside jokes and things like that. Because if you're armed with that kind of information, you can use it to your advantage. So with an understanding of the cultural environment and everything that goes on in those communities, you get to think beyond, let's do something to go viral. You get to understand that it's not about spreading your agenda. It's about contributing to a wider conversation that is already happening independent of you. Your job is to connect, not to project, not to broadcast. And to connect, if you're armed with an understanding of the people you want to reach an understanding of the culture in the communities they're a part of, and an understanding or a good strategy for showing up in a way to connect with them, you'll be armed with everything you need to really get your message, whatever your message is, to really spread. Because again, if we're able to attract the attention of an audience, we have an asset we can leverage to grow our business.